This is J2O, aka Kinetic, back with Grand Arena Championship Season 1, Set 2. We got 3 matches, really 2 matches today. The third match wasn't terribly competitive. So you see my opponents there. So jumping right into it, we've got ourselves, looks like we're going to go JTR versus First Order. This is not going to be new, you guys have seen this before. JTR is always a good matchup against First Order or Bounty Hunters. It's kind of like that third tier. I think JTR kind of comes out on top, but you'll have First Order and Bounty Hunters kind of fall in that third tier as well. It's interesting because I've seen some of those trees, and you know, some of those teams can scale up into the 2 tier. You know, for example, Django Bounty Hunters can counter Night Sisters occasionally. I don't know that's a consistent matchup, but you'd have to have a really stacked Django. So I think the return on that investment may not be there, but you know, they can stretch. They can stretch up into the big leagues there. If you, especially if you know what you're doing, or maybe if your opponent just recently unlocked a group of characters or something, you might be able to handle it that way. It's always something to consider when you go into Grand Arena, when you're assessing your opponent. But you see here, making short work. I love this config with Finn and Resistance Trooper. Turn meter train is real. Finn gives you the opportunity to regen almost all your protection and health. And he's actually pretty tanky, all things considered. And against things like Nest and stuff, sometimes he can come in big because over a long period of fight, right, he starts stacking his damage up. And so he can really turn it around. Also against like Barris and like some of those old Barris Kenobi teams and that kind of thing. You know, it's a really good character to have. That's the only reason that, you know, JTR usually doesn't struggle with those teams. And Finn could potentially be a standalone if you had a really deep Resistance roster. But the second Resistance team, no matter what comp you go with, it's just not going to be as competitive. See here, I'm kind of buying time, I think, to make sure all my protections regen, but it should go down now here. That and the Kylo is not able to take a turn, so he keeps stacking defense. Yeah, easy. 60. 60 for an average per match is a nice target for me. I love to get above that by running under. But there are some teams like JTR and Imperial Troopers, for example, where you can run against with a full squad, but end up with, you know, pretty much guaranteed to have full health and everything going into the next fight. So I ran IT here against Bounty Hunters, and he had a really weak IG-88, so I decided to exploit that. This is again textbook. Now, Nest can be a little bit dangerous for IT. Not a little bit. She can be very dangerous for IT. That it's not a joke. You know, that's something that you have to be very cautious of. But I did look at his Nest. His Nest only had like 20k health. So I really wasn't that stressed about it. You know, he wasn't stacking health on Nest for the protection up. So I'm very fortunate there and get a daze. And I also just barely don't lose Snow Trooper, so that was very lucky. I suspect I'm not going to end up finishing here with full health on Snow Trooper, but we'll see. Maybe he gets up there. Managed to AoE down. Let's see how it goes. I really don't remember how this fight went, if I was able to finish with full protection or not. Let's see. Yeah, no. I ended up with 3 without it. So we got CLS going up against the Old Republic. And this is a pretty straightforward, easy match. It wasn't a terribly dangerous Old Republic. I do like Wampa on Republic. I don't know if you've seen on my defense, a lot of times I will run Wampa. But and he can be very dangerous for rebels in general. But I knew I had the depth to use this team here, and I wanted to use it safely. And I wanted to hang on to my Thrawn. So I didn't want to run Emperor Palpatine with Thrawn for that team. I wanted to hang on my Thrawn in case I needed to use Darth Revan. So that was kind of the reasoning there. So I went ahead and CLS was the next team up, from and it's what we call a 2-tier team, right? Or second tier team. Interesting little scoundrels team there. I think I'm trying to decide what I need to run. So I made it to the back line, and I realized that I'm not going to need to run my Padme as a backup against Darth Revan. And I'll show the field at the end of this. So, but I figured I'd show a little more Padme. I know not a lot of people have seen her in full action. The Scoundrels team is not, it's not anything to write home about. Definitely an overmatched team. Padme is definitely a tier 2 team, and Scoundrels are definitely a lower tier 3 team. I would say they're a lower tier 3 team because they don't necessarily counter a lot there. For me, they're more of a gate. I can use them to force you to use a team that you may not want to, because they're good enough to wipe out your bottom stuff. You're not going to pick at them. But they're not good enough to really pressure. But I always run Infus Nest. I think Infus Nest is what forces your hand to use a good team there. And so that to me is important. So we got DR here going up. And I believe it is against his Revan. Oh, it's Night Sisters. Okay, I found Night Sisters in the back there. Probably didn't need Sith Trooper, but, it's fine. Oh, that was dirty. That was just so dirty. By the way, if you ever run into a Night Sister team and you have DR left, it's just gloriously easy. But, I burned that team there, and it kind of, it may bite me, because you'll see ahead here, I struggle a little bit. So I'm going to run Ewoks against a very weak clones team. I found this as an interesting matchup because I actually haven't really seen the clones on defense much. So it was good to see that, at least, on paper here. And he doesn't run Rex, which is kind of how I envision running my clones eventually. And you see they almost do. They almost get the start and the finishes going. Elder, fortunately, wasn't touched. But, that could have been very dangerous. So let's get some dazes up here. Also had no Zetas on his leadership there. Sorry, guys. Oh, yeah. That was not because of this matchup. Maybe it was. It might have been because of this matchup. But, Ewoks are solid. I bounce between them on offense and defense depending on what my opponent's first order team looks like. If I think I can beat the first order team with my Ewoks, then I'll tend to try to keep them on offense. If I think that I cannot, then I'll put them on defense. I don't like leaving them on defense. I just don't have another team that's a solid, basically a solid 8th option. Because I think all my 8th option teams that I'd like to leave on defense can all be sold by Nest. And so I try to avoid doing that if I can help it. I'm not trying to give my opponent an easier win, opportunity than otherwise needed. So, see here, just cleaning up, not terribly difficult. But that initial opener was really good for clones. A really good opener. So we have Bugs and Grievous up here, and this is where using CLS early kind of might bite me here. Let's see what we can do with Treya against Grievous. It's a weaker Grievous team. Fortunately, it's not a very strong Grievous team. So my hope is that Treya will be able to sustain and survive, you know, the threat. I like the auto dispels. I think this is a really good counter team. What always scares me though is obviously Grievous's killing after a droid dies. So I believe what I attempt to do here, and what I would definitely do, is try to get that first annihilate off on Grievous, and then you can avoid that. And the only thing is, I'm actually not sure. I think it does 99, or is it 999? 99? So I don't know if it could kill a full health, full protection Grievous. That's an interesting thing to consider. This Grievous was definitely not near that, but definitely something to think about. I actually didn't think of that until now, but perhaps that's why this is not a hard counter. I don't know. That's a good question, but you see it's an interesting matchup. They have Treya in a very dangerous situation right now. I probably should have used the protection up on her there, just to protect her from Droideka, but it seems like it's a non-factor now. So 59 there. And Emperor Palpatine is what I took on Bugs, and I failed. This is showing what he did offensively. He took 4 attempts on Night Sisters. I saw that he turn meter loaded them, and that's absolutely, it must have eaten his remaining meta teams. And you'll see there, he did take 2 attempts on Grievous, exactly the way Grievous is supposed to play defense, and then he hit a wall on my Bugs. So this is where we first found the power of Bugs. The changes had just gone in. There you go, just showing the win. So my next opponent, Leon. Leon was definitely the better opponent of the group. He had a really weird, I don't know. His DR was not terribly good. His Bastila was not terribly good. I don't know. He had a lot of things going for him, but his mods were a little weaker, and he hadn't optimized characters that needed to be optimized with speed. And I just think overall, like, you know, it's great you have the comps, but without having that little extra speed, or at least having speed that's close to your opponent, you know, you can't maximize that setup. So see here, I'm running a little bit of a weaker Sith Empire squad, at least for me. You know, I only have a gear 9 Sith assassin. Look at that health; it's so bad. You know, it just wasn't a threatening team. And I'll be honest, I don't know what happens here, but a Sith Trooper doesn't pre-taunt. So I have no idea. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's an Omega. I don't remember for sure if that's the case, but yeah, just bad. Like, why put this team on defense? Like, putting it on offense gives you so much more damage control. It's just very wasted on defense. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. And Sith Assassin's going to survive, and Sith Trooper dies. Of all the people to die. But it's okay. I got rid of his DR, strongest team showing at the initial onslaught here. And looks like we've got a Bosk, and I think I'm running JTR against that. I tried to cut these matches a little closer just to kind of prevent wasting so much time. Again, it's the same classic setup. You know, I like to run Finn, Resistance Trooper, lots of dispels, lots of turn meter, nice taunting tank, regen. I think this is a great offensive team for Grand Arena. I mentioned it before. I will look to experiment with this team, I think, in the far future. I intend to get Gear 13 Resistance Trooper and Amidala Holdle, or Amelin Holdle, and Gear 13 her. They both gain really nicely when the Gear 13 changes. I mean, very nicely. And so I'm curious. Holdo on defense with a Zeta, that really intrigues me. I have no idea. This is definitely a distant thing. This is not on my radar for the short term. But I really like that. On paper, I look forward to kind of seeing that going forward. You know, but maybe I'll be willing to whale out and give that a go, because on paper I really love that, and I'd love to bring that kind of content to you guys so you can kind of get a feel for that too. And that's just something that I don't think anybody's going to focus on for a long time. But it could be good. It could be good for Resistance. It could make them a really dangerous. They're top of tier 3 teams, right? So making them a really good defensive team, in my opinion, is going to make them, require a tier 2 team to beat. And, they'll all beat her. Night Sisters is the best matchup against JTR, but most of the time people put Night Sisters on defense. So they may all beat her, but I think that team could potentially always take points from your opponent. I don't know. It's a deep theory craft. You'll see Old Republic there and Ewoks on defense. We got Night Sisters and Rebels showing up front. Phoenix, that is. So I'm going to go ahead and run the Treya against Night Sisters. Again, a classic matchup for me. So a tier 2 team versus a tier 2 team. I'm going to start kind of referencing it this way. Hopefully, it's either informative or kind of opens discussion about these teams. And I look forward to kind of seeing, I'm not sure where bugs fall, the Geonosians. I do look forward to seeing where that falls on kind of that tiering. And if you haven't seen that tiering, maybe I'll put a link here in this description. But the tiering is something that's kind of gone around Reddit and kind of been tweaked. And I definitely have some comments. I'm going to do my underrated Grand Arena Championship teams in an upcoming video, because I think that that chart really underlines some very underrated things that you can use in Grand Arena. But I look forward to seeing where bugs fall. My initial experience with bugs was after the change. They're very good on defense, and you have to kill Geonosian Brood Alpha, and it's very, very difficult to kill a Gear 10 Geonosian Brood Alpha in a single hit. And that's pretty much what you need to do because of the health equalization and protection equalization. And that's very challenging. And this is a non-Zeta team. Can be very, very challenging. Can put out a lot of damage, a lot of turns. And it's definitely a gate team. A gate team. You are not going to be getting... You're not going to be going through that with your Wigs team. It's just not going to work. It's not good enough. And so I'm curious to see where it falls. I think it could be close to a tier 2. I think the only thing that would make it not a tier 2 is going to be that it can be soloed by Nest. I believe that's the case. I actually have not done or seen that yet. But on paper, I can see that occurring because they don't hit very hard. It reminds me of Ewoks in that regard. I think there's going to be a lot of dispels available. So I think eventually Nest would be able to start wrecking on damage. If you put it on auto, but I think you need a high tenacity Nest, and there is a drawback there. They regen a lot of protection, so you really have to wait for your Nest. That's the one difference between Ewoks. So I don't know. It may not be good enough. Nest may not be a consistent counter to that team, and so if that's the case, then I think it falls squarely in tier 2. So that's about it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna try to keep these videos minimal. If they're not good. Unfortunately, here's my opponents again. This was a very simple set. But they do get better. I have seen a lot better competition, so I do look forward to getting that to you guys. Um, but thanks for watching. Subscribe and like below.